The first sign that the night would go wrong was the silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the comforting hush of a candlelit restaurant. It was the kind of silence that makes you painfully aware of every clink of silverware, every forced smile, every second ticking away like a countdown to humiliation. Jonathan Mercer sat stiffly at a corner table in a small Italian restaurant in downtown Columbus, Ohio, staring at the half-melted candle between him and the woman who clearly regretted agreeing to meet him. He had faced tougher things in life. He had held his wife's hand in a hospital room and felt it grow cold. He had walked back into a house that no longer echoed with laughter. He had learned how to braid his 6-year-old daughter Ava's hair by watching online tutorials at midnight. But somehow, sitting there on that blind date felt just as terrifying. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet miracles that change lives, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even the worst nights can become the beginning of something beautiful. Jonathan hadn't wanted to come. His coworker Mark had insisted. "It's time," he had said. "You can't keep hiding behind fatherhood forever." And maybe Mark was right. 3 years had passed since the accident on Interstate 70 took Hannah from them. 3 years of bedtime stories, packed lunches, school recitals, and lonely evenings after Ava fell asleep. The woman across from him, Vanessa, checked her phone for the 4th time in 10 minutes. She was polished, ambitious, impeccably dressed. She talked about her upcoming promotion in Chicago and her plans to travel Europe. She smiled politely when he mentioned his daughter, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Jonathan felt its thin, invisible line dividing their worlds. Her future was wide-open highways and international flights. His was daycare pickups and pediatric appointments. Neither path was wrong, but they didn't intersect. When the check came, Vanessa excused herself to the restroom and never returned. At first, Jonathan thought she might have gotten a call. Then 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The waiter approached with that uncomfortable, apologetic look that said everything without words. She had paid for her half at the front and left. Jonathan nodded, trying to laugh it off, but his chest felt hollow. He paid the rest, left a tip too generous for his budget, and stared down at his phone. He considered calling a babysitter to stay longer so he could walk around and clear his head, but the thought of Ava waiting up for him tightened his throat. That's when he heard it, a soft voice from the table beside him. "Sit here!" He looked up, confused. At the next table sat a woman with chestnut hair pulled loosely into a bun. She wore a simple blue sweater and had kind, observant eyes. A half-finished slice of cheesecake rested on her plate. She wasn't glamorous like Vanessa. She looked real, warm, present. Jonathan hesitated. Embarrassment burned his cheeks. "You don't have to spend the rest of your night pretending that didn't just happen," she added gently. "I promise less terrifying." He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding and moved to her table. Her name was Caroline Hayes. She was a 3rd-grade teacher from Dayton, in Columbus for a weekend workshop. She had noticed everything: the awkward silences, the forced smiles, the eventual disappearance. Jonathan braced himself for pity. Instead, he found curiosity, not about his failure, but about him. They didn't talk about Vanessa. They talked about Ava, about how she insisted on wearing mismatched socks because they have feelings if they are separated, about how Jonathan once burned an entire batch of pancakes and pretended they were extra crispy. Caroline left it not politely, but fully, like the stories mattered. For the first time in years, Jonathan didn't feel like a burden explaining his life. He didn't feel like he had to apologize for being a package deal. As the restaurant emptied, Caroline admitted something that made him pause. She had been on a blind date too. The man never showed up. She had almost left before dessert, but something told her to stay. "Maybe," she said, "we both got stood up for a reason." Jonathan walked her to her car under the soft glow of streetlights. Columbus felt different that night, less heavy, less indifferent. They exchanged numbers, not with dramatic promises, but with cautious hope. Still, hope terrified him. The next few weeks were slow and uncertain. They texted, then called, then met again, this time at a park halfway between Columbus and Dayton. Jonathan brought Ava. He worried the entire drive. What if Ava didn't like her? What if Caroline realized how complicated his life truly was? But children have a way of seeing what adults miss. Ava studied Caroline with serious brown eyes, then handed her a dandelion and declared her approved. Caroline didn't try to replace Hannah. She didn't force herself into their routine. She simply stepped beside them. She showed up to Ava's school play with a handmade sign. She helped with science fair projects. She listened when Jonathan talked about the guilt he still carried, the guilt of surviving, of moving forward. One evening, months later, Jonathan found himself standing in the kitchen after Ava had gone to bed, watching Caroline rinse dishes. The house felt alive again. Not in the same way it once had, but in a new, gentle rhythm. He realized something profound. Love after loss isn't betrayal, it's bravery. Still, challenges didn't disappear. Ava struggled at first with the idea that someone new might take up space in her father's heart. Jonathan struggled with fear that happiness was temporary, that it could be snatched away again without warning. Caroline struggled too. Loving a widower meant loving the memory of someone else. It meant understanding that Hannah's photos would always hang on the wall, but instead of competing with the past, Caroline honored it. She asked Jonathan to tell her stories about Hannah. She told Ava it was okay to miss her mom and still care about her. Slowly, the walls Jonathan had built began to crack. A year after that disastrous blind date, Jonathan returned to the same Italian restaurant in Columbus. Same corner, same candlelight, but this time Caroline sat across from him. Ava was with a trusted babysitter. Jonathan's hands trembled, but not from fear. He told Caroline that the worst night of his life had led to the best chapter. He told her she hadn't just offered him a chair at her table, she had offered him a second chance at joy. When he asked her to marry him, her eyes filled with tears before she even answered. Yes, not the loud, cinematic kind. Just a quiet, certain yes. If this story is touching your heart right now, if you believe that broken beginnings can still lead to beautiful endings, please take a moment to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps stories of hope reach more people who might desperately need them. And before we reach the end, I have a special request for you. Comment the word second chance if you believe life can surprise us when we least expect it. On their wedding day in a small chapel outside Columbus, Ava walked down the aisle scattering petals with serious concentration. When Caroline knelt to hug her afterward, Ava whispered something Jonathan would never forget. She said she was glad her first mommy picked such a nice second one. Jonathan stood there, overwhelmed by the simple, fragile miracle of it all. A year earlier, he had felt abandoned at a restaurant table, convinced that his life was too complicated for anyone to choose. But sometimes, rejection is redirection. Sometimes, the door that slams shut is the one protecting you from the wrong story. And sometimes, the woman at the next table is exactly where your future has been waiting all along. Jonathan learned that night that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives quietly, with a gentle voice saying, "Sit here. If this story moved you even a little, please engage with the video, like it, share it, and tell us your thoughts below. You never know who might need this reminder that even terrible nights can become turning points. Because in the end, second chances aren't accidents. They are invitations.